The following presentation is brought to you by kmmedia.pro. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information. Now stay right where you are as we present. Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas, one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. Welcome everybody to another episode of Positive Talk Radio. I am so excited again. I get excited easily, but not in this particular case, because I get to talk to somebody who I'm quite literally talking all the way around the world and back again, because she lives in the Seattle area, which is where I live. And she is quite an amazing author coming up. She's got a book coming out in January. Her name is Lisa Thompson. She is a mountain climber, which is something that is so foreign to me. I would have absolutely no idea how that all works. But Lisa, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Thanks, Kevin. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
How did you get into mountain climbing?
Well, it started in Seattle, which is where we both are today. I did not, however, grow up in a mountaineering state. I grew up in Illinois, so the highest point in that state is 120 feet, and it has a name. It's so prominent. So I didn't, needless to say, I did not grow up in an environment where I read about pioneering mountaineers like Sir Edmund Hillary or Tenzing Norgay. I wasn't even really that athletic, if I'm being honest. I, for example, didn't make the volleyball team when I was in junior high, but I loved the outdoors. I always loved being outside. And when I was small, we had a nice big yard. And so I'd climb trees and explore in the cornfields near my house. So I liked that. And I liked proving people wrong. And those two things sort of collided shortly after I moved to Seattle. I came here for a job and was the only female at my level in that position. And the guys, my peers, who were good guys, not to take anything at all away from them, but they would go climbing regularly because climbing is sort of, Kevin, part of the culture in Seattle. Like it's, we see the mountains when it's clear out. We see Mount Rainier, but they're certainly all around us. And so my peers would go climbing most weekends, and they never asked me to join them. And instead of doing like the logical thing, which would have been to say, hey, that sounds really fun, I would love to come with you. Can I? I'm sure they would have said yes. Instead, I got really upset about it. I got frustrated. And it really wasn't that I wanted to learn about climbing. What I wanted was to be a part of their group. I wanted them to see me as capable. And I felt like, their adventures on the weekend would be a way for me to do that. So instead, I just started climbing on my own.
Very, very nice. Well, then you would be aware, because you live in Seattle, that there's a club called the Mountaineers Club.
There is. I'm a member of the Mountaineers.
Did you know I was the building services manager there at one point?
At the facility on Sandpoint Way?
It wasn't there at that time. It was right there on the base of Queen Anne Hill.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, have they moved?
Yes, now they're the Mountaineers headquarters now are at Sandpoint Way.
Yeah, we stand the company I worked for stands in infamy there, because my bosses were so kind to the restaurant workers that they organized into a union and shut down the restaurant, and so shut down the restaurant. So, but so I was there for a little bit, and I met I know you're gonna his name. I had it there for a second. Lou and
Oh, Lou Whitaker. Yeah.
Lou Whitaker. Yes,
That's amazing. Good for you.
and stuff. So I enjoyed that, but I can't think of, if you have never been to Washington State, and this is a worldwide broadcast, so a lot of people haven't. We got lots of hills, lots of
You do.
medium hills, large hills. We have a mountain called Mount Si that
Yeah.
is like a 5 mile hike up, and I almost fell off of that mountain when I was a kid, going across a ice field on my backpack and stuff. Anyway, so you started climbing by yourself.
Yeah.
That was hard to do.
Well, so this is great. So I can sort of name drop mountains a little bit with you since you're local. So I climbed Mount Pilchuck,
Oh, yes?
north of Seattle. That was the first mountain in air quotes that I climbed, which is really hiking. But for a Midwesterner like myself, it was a big deal. And I
It was.
remember getting home and calling my father and telling him that my father was still in Illinois. I just climbed a mountain today. And of course, he thought that was incredible. But that was where I got started. I had no idea what I was doing. I just started hiking and, hiking up the mountains in the Cascades, and eventually signed on with a guide company to attempt Mount Rainier. That was in 2008. We did not summit. The weather got bad at about 11,000 feet. And I and our whole team turned around, and I was very happy to turn around because I
How
was not really ready.
how
Um,
long did you prepare for that? Because I know that there's a protocol that you really need to do,
oh,
to get into that kind of a shape. How long did it take you to get into that shape?
yeah, so I trained for about 6 months, and I could talk all day about training because now I've started my own company called Alpine Athletics, where I train and coach mountaineers to prepare. So I took it very seriously even back then. But I was still pretty clueless. Like, I had this huge purple backpack that weighed, an unreasonable amount of weight. Typical backpacks to go up Mount Rainier weigh about 40 pounds. Mine probably weighed 50 because I probably had like a full jar of peanut butter in there or something. I had, I just didn't know what I was doing, but I was very, very driven. And I like the idea of a challenge. And
Apparently so.
apparently, yeah. And so we didn't summit that first year, but I got enough of a taste of, this mix of mental and physical challenge that you experience when you climb a mountain. And I wanted more of that. So I came back the next year and I did summit. And just that feeling of standing at 14,000 feet as, the sun is just starting to split from the horizon, and seeing colors that I had never seen before was something that it really was awe-inspiring, like in the traditional definition of that word. Um, and I wanted to keep doing it. I wanted to keep experiencing nature in that way, and I wanted to keep pushing myself mentally and physically. And if I'm being honest, I wanted to keep proving people wrong as well.
You you have got the will of a very strong person to be able
Thank you.
to do that, because to fast forward, and we're going to talk about it, you've climbed K2, you've
I did.
climbed every major mountain in this country for sure, and many around the world, and somewhere in there, and I suspect that it helped you when you discovered that you had cancer.
Yeah, so that was in 2015, and my mountaineering career was just really starting to blossom. I had climbed Rainier a couple of times. I had climbed Denali in Alaska. That's the highest mountain in North America.
Now, is that the former Mount McKinley?
Former Mount McKinley. That's right.
Very good.
Yep. And so I felt like, I think I'm ready to climb in the Himalaya. And the Himalaya is this, huge mountain range that bisects Asia. And it's really special for high altitude mountaineers because most of the highest mountains in the world reside there. And when we say high in mountaineering terms, we're talking about mountains that are higher than 26,000 feet or 8,000 meters. And there are only 14 mountains in the world that reach that altitude. And so for me in 2015 to be ready to attempt one of them was a really big deal. I felt like, and I really did feel ready. And so I set this goal. I began training and I had a routine mammogram one day. And, I was a bit cocky, right? I remember going to that doctor's appointment before work and thinking, like, I just check the box, do this once a year. Um, I was 42 years old. I'm an athlete. I take care of myself. I floss my teeth. I do those things that we are led to believe will keep us healthy. And so getting a cancer diagnosis um, was absolutely devastating to me. And as it is to everyone who's heard those words directed at them or someone they love. Um, and as you said, Kevin, I'm a very determined person. And so I was quite determined not to let cancer dictate my climbing priorities, which in hindsight is not something I recommend. Um, but it did, this climb, which was planned for August of that year, I was diagnosed in February, um, kept me motivated. It kept me really in tune with my body and what I was capable of and what I was going through. And mentally, it gave me, something to strive for and something that would really just pull me out of bed if I didn't feel like getting out of bed. It would, keep me positive because I just maintained this picture in my mind of me climbing that mountain. And that is what on many, many days when I didn't feel like moving or talking or, doing anything, what kept me going.
Because I assume that at that point you had to go through chemo and all of that, and which
Yeah,
is
I actually did not go through chemo. I'm very, very fortunate that my cancer was resolved with surgery and medication. And so it didn't have to go through chemo, thankfully.
oh,
Um,
thank goodness, because that can be
yes.
devastating to the
Yes,
body.
absolutely devastating, absolutely. So I'm fortunate in that regard, and fortunate that I had an amazing medical team since we're in Seattle, I'll name them, so Swedish Medical Center,
Yep.
just phenomenal, and, owe so much to that team, and, we'll talk about it in a bit, but when I stood on the top of Mount Everest, it was gratitude for everyone that had gotten me that far, and certainly my healthcare team was part of that.
It's amazing to me because when you're talking about the height of a mountain, Mount Rainier's 14,000 and change.
Yep.
You're talking about mountains that are almost twice as tall as Mount Rainier.
Yeah, so Mount Rainier is 14,410 feet, and Mount Everest is 29,032 feet. So twice
So
as
even
tall.
more than twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you see, when we talk about mountain climbing and that sort of thing, I think about mountain climbing and I think snow, ice, wind, cold. You must think about something completely different than that.
Well, I think about all those things too, but there's something about that combination of rock and ice and snow and wind and cold weather that motivates me, that makes me want to test myself in that environment and test myself with that mountain. Like I mentioned, I take training very, very seriously, and I always want to make sure that my skill and ability match what that mountain is going to require of me. And those aspects of the mountains push me to be my best.
Well, even just setting up your camp and setting up your tent and getting into your tent and your sleeping bag and all that stuff to stay alive, that
Yep.
to me that's like, no, I'm sorry. I'll wait for the helicopter trip to go up and and stuff because I admire your intestinal fortitude and your drive. Where did that drive come from?
Well, it's been a lot of therapy for me to sort this out. Um, But,
Oh,
I grew up with a very sort of in a very strict household. My parents were very hardworking, and the way they showed love was to keep working hard. And, they weren't often around when I was a kid, and I just really, really wanted their love. I wanted to feel it in a way that made sense to me. And looking back on that, that pushed me, that desire to prove myself, pushed me to do a lot of things. It pushed me to be the first person in my family to go to college. It pushed me to leave my small farming community that raised me, pushed me to study engineering, and ultimately to climb mountains. And so I think there are two sides to everything. That sort of drive at times has been overwhelming for me. At times it's gotten me into trouble when I just will not, sort of the Churchill definition of never quitting, isn't always the right one in a personal relationship. And so it's definitely gotten me into trouble. But it also, is something now that I see as a tool, something that I can use in a situation like climbing where I need to dig really deep or I need to work really hard to accomplish a goal. And so I'm grateful for just about everything in my life. I'm grateful for my childhood and my family and the way I was raised because it gave me sort of that sense of perseverance and resilience.
for what it's worth, I think that we all need therapy from our youth,
Yes, we do.
because we each into our own self have got issues that have come to us in adulthood that started when we were wee little ones.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's really true. And I'm grateful that I have those resources available to me because they've made a big difference in my life.
Absolutely. And by the way, you're a driven person, so you've got a company, you've also got a book that's coming. Let's
Yes.
let's yeah, let's first of all let's talk about your company that
Yeah,
is because I may need to go there just to get into shape rather than
absolutely. I'll be
I
happy
ain't
to help
climbing
you, Kevin.
anything, but yeah, as long when global warming gets to the point where Mount Rainier is dirt, I'll go there, baby.
It'll probably be a tiny little hill then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So tell us about your company and your vision.
Yeah, so as I said, I've always taken preparation for climbing really seriously. And to me, that preparation is more than just physical. There's a really significant mental component to climbing any mountain. And there's also what I call the tactical side of preparation, which is understanding the route and having your gear really dialed and just being prepared and very well rounded. And so I realized a few years into my climbing career that I I took this approach much more seriously than a lot of other people. And it became, even for me personally, sort of my secret sauce. I was fortunate to work with a very skilled mountaineering coach as well for many years. And so I realized that I saw this idea of preparation differently than a lot of other mountaineers. And so in 2018, actually at K2 Base Camp, I wrote out the content for a website and sort of the outline of how business would work. I had trained some friends prior to that, but it was in 2018 that I really took it seriously and kicked it off and created Alpine Athletics. And so today I'm fortunate that I've helped more than 100 people summit their mountains, hit their mountaineering goals. And my objective is to share everything that I've learned in the mountains with the people that I coach and to make sure, nobody has unlimited time. Most of the people that I coach are, working a very full career, have a family, have so much going on in their lives, and they want to maximize their time training so that they can be successful when they're in the mountains. And so that's my job. My job is to make sure that you do all the hard work up front so that when you get to the mountain, you're completely prepared, ready for the challenges of that peak and fit physically in order to take them on. And it's really, really rewarding to me. So this is Everest season. So Everest summits occurred earlier this month. And I was fortunate that 3 of my climbers summited, and it's just the coolest experience to get those text messages from them and see their summit photos and know that I've played a part in helping them get there.
Do you ever have a conversation with somebody that goes like this? You haven't really done everything I've asked you to do, and you're not prepared. And so consequently, I'm going to recommend that you not go.
Very, very rarely. The people that I work with are very motivated. They've invested a lot financially and personally in the peaks that they're endeavoring to climb, and so it's unusual that someone isn't putting in the work. But there have been little times where I need, part of my job is to nudge right into like, and I'm a very data driven person. And I like to just sort of let those, I'm recording everything that the athletes I work with do um, via their smartwatches. And so I like to let the data sort of speak for itself and say, like, this is where ideally, someone climbing Rainier should be here, and this is where you are. And I think these are the things we need to do to get you there.
I'm willing to bet that your nudge is more like a push for some folks.
Well, I like to say that I meet the athlete where they are because some people come to me and they really have, like, maybe they just watched 14 Peaks on Netflix and they're like, I want to do that. And they don't know anything about climbing. Or other people have attempted Everest before and not been successful and realized that their training was part of the Delta. And so I like to really tailor sort of my input and, certainly my training plans for that athlete, because I think that's how we're the most successful together.
Well, you certainly have a lot of credibility
Thank you.
because it's like if somebody says, "So why should I hire you as a coach?" Well, I've climbed K2 and I've summited K2. I've summited Everest. I've summited Mount McKinley, and so I'm good at what I do. And you're able to, but the other the other aspect of climbing a mountain that I wanted to touch on was the unfortunate thing about there are people that are still on K2 that have been
Sure.
gone and dead for a long time.
Sure.
It's a dangerous thing to do.
Yes, it is a very dangerous thing to do. And K2 in particular, um, is notorious for being dangerous, is notorious for being a deadly mountain. One of the first people to summit it coined it the savage mountain that tries to kill you. And I felt that every day that I was there. As I said, I felt very in sync with Mount Everest. I felt like, it was challenging, but the mountain and I were working together as a team. And I did not feel that way on K2. I felt like every day that mountain was trying to kill me in the form of rock slides or avalanches or the death, witnessing the deaths of other climbers. And it really forced me to confront my fear. There was a point on K2, there's a section which is probably the crux of the mountain. The crux is the part of a climb that's the most challenging. And on K2, that's called the Black Pyramid. And if you can imagine, you're at 25,000 feet, and the rock there is very cobbled, sort of black, cobbly rock. It's very slick with ice and melting snow. And I'm attached to the mountain with my harness and a climbing rope, breathing bottled oxygen. I'm wearing a bulky down suit and crampons, which are not the ideal gear for rock climbing, but given the terrain of a mix of rock and ice, that's what we were wearing. Um, and it was incredibly challenging climbing, and I wanted to quit. I, hung there and let my mind just play out this whole scenario of how I could be back at base camp in a couple of days. I could be eating cake. I could be the next day after that. I could be in Islamabad, sleeping in an actual bed, using an actual toilet. I just let all those things play out, and really wanted to turn around. And in that moment, just paused, took some deep breaths, and said, is this all that I'm capable of? And my honest answer was no, it wasn't. I knew I was capable of more. I was just tired and I was frustrated and I was embarrassed that I was climbing slowly. And I had to overcome all of those things plus fear in order to keep moving forward.
That's remarkable. That's because I would have said, "No, that's it, babe. I'm done." as you're lying. So, but I wanted to ask you because you mentioned it, and yeah, and you are writing a book, and that's going to be coming out, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But I
Yep.
assume part of that book is you're going to talk about the climbs and some of the people who lost their lives that were either in your in your group or in another group around you?
Yeah. So there is, you know, death is a potential outcome of climbing any mountain. It's inherently dangerous. And
You've
before I,
convinced me I'm not going.
what's that?
You've convinced me I'm not going.
Yeah, I'm really selling it, aren't I? It's great. Come along. It's like Shackleton. Just come along. You might die. It'll be fun.
Exactly.
Um, and I really had to, like, in all seriousness, especially before I went to K2, I had to sort of sit with that. I had recently beat cancer. My father had died of cancer. He was diagnosed when I was climbing Mount Everest and died about a month after I got home. And there was certainly questions in, my circle of friends and people that I respect about why I would do this. Why would I climb a mountain where 1 in 4 people die, especially after just beating cancer and fighting for my own life, especially after just watching my father lose his. And there were very, very dark moments where I sat and just had to really contemplate why I was doing this and to make sure I was doing it for the right reasons. Um, and ultimately, there was just this little voice inside of me that said that you're capable of doing this and that it was important to show what especially women can do in the mountains. Not a lot of women have climbed K2. I'm only the second American woman to summit it. Maybe there's half a dozen women that have summited it ever. And so it was important to me to just show what was possible, even after, the heartbreak of cancer and everything that I had been through to get to that point. So it was hard for me to wrestle with the dark side of that, but there was a part of me that felt that I was capable of doing it successfully.
So, which is easier, climbing a mountain or writing a book?
I jokingly say to my friends that writing about mountaineering is harder than actually climbing a mountain.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. I started writing when I had cancer. It was a very, it was journaling. It was a very cathartic process for me and a way to just sort of stay positive and keep thoughts positive and sort of get rid of all the negativity. Um, and through that process of cancer, I realized a lot of things about myself. I realized that life is fragile, and I realized that it's up to us to define the lives that we will live. And so I chose to, at that time in my marriage, I also paused my corporate career and decided to focus full time on climbing and being in the mountains. And all of those changes that occurred during that part of my life really became cathartic for me. And then subsequently summiting K2 felt like I had overcome a lot of obstacles. I had faced a lot of fears and sometimes gracefully, sometimes not, worked through them. And I wanted to share that with people. I wanted, to share what I had learned and what I had overcome in order to hopefully help somebody who's struggling with their own obstacle, whatever that might be. I'm fortunate now to be able to speak to audiences. And the best, absolutely the best feeling is when someone comes up to me after and says, I'm going through this thing with, my family or my kids or whatever, my health. And I realize now that I can get through it. And so my hope for Finding Elevation when it's launched in January is that it gives that to people. It is a climbing memoir at its core, so it will appeal to readers who are interested in the mountains and in climbing, but it's also a really deep and personal exploration into human motivation and risk taking.
Well, and it's also and obviously the book isn't out yet, so this is my assumption anyway, is that it is also an illustration of what's possible,
Yes,
of when somebody makes a decision that number one, you had a bunch of strikes against you. You're
for
like,
sure.
you're like, oh come on, you're a woman, you can't do that. Then the women can or don't climb K2.
For sure.
And all of those, but it transcends mountain climbing. It is in every aspect of our lives. We all have talents, and if we believe that we can rise to the best use of our talent and can make it, we can.
Yes,
If we don't believe that,
we won't.
well, we can't. So this is just a great example of the book, and I envision that the book's gonna do very well, and your speaking career, because of the book, is gonna do very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that endorsement very much.
Well, and I'm not coming to get into shape with you. It would scare me, but no.
It's not the first time I've heard that, Kevin.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. But so let me ask you: do you feel proud of yourself?
I am proud of myself. Yeah,
As
that's
well, you should be.
that's an important question. Um, I am proud of myself, and when I summited K2, I there was a point where I'm climbing and I looked up and I'm on this snow slope and there was a lot of fresh snow. So as I'm stepping, just about every step is breaking, even though other people had stepped there before me and just sort of sliding and stepping and not making a lot of upward progress. And I looked up sort of in the midst of that frustration and I saw the point where the sky and the snow met. And right there, I saw bright colors. And I knew that those were people's down suits. There were people standing there, and that meant it was the summit. And I wanted to cry so badly in that moment. Just, it's all this emotion of everything that had gone into getting me that far. And I, sort of reprimanded myself and said, like, keep it together. And 30 or 40 minutes later, I stood on the summit, and um, that was an accomplishment that I will forever feel proud of and grateful for. And that gratitude, I think, is something that I want to take with me every day, because it's so easy sometimes in our lives to look past that. But those feelings, those emotions were very special for me.
I have to remark, I just finished a podcast before our podcast, and the subject of the book that they were talking about, he had gone to
Yeah.
Paraguay, and he put together a leper colony. He took his family down there. He was a doctor, and he did incredible things over the course of his life. And
Wow.
I asked them, because he died at 94 or 96, and I said, at the end of it, was he proud of himself? And they said no. He didn't understand all the things that he had done in his life,
Oh,
and it was like, that is terrible.
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. So my advice to you is, whatever you're doing, do it to the best of your ability and be proud of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's sad to hear.
And but so what's next? You've got other plans. What's next for you? You've got your book that's coming out. Are you going on a book tour? What are you going to do?
So hopefully book tour, we'll see COVID wise how that plays out. But I've been doing some readings virtually and I love doing that. So hopefully we can work in a tour as well. Um, I'm fortunate to have climbed many mountains in my career, and I am continuing to climb. After summiting K2, I really don't endeavor to climb anything that deadly or that challenging again. Like I said, I feel grateful to have summited it on my first attempt and to have survived. And now, what is more important to me is really to give back to these mountain villages and countries that I've just fallen in love with. I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in Nepal and a lot of time in Pakistan, and so along with two other female mountaineering friends, we've started a nonprofit, which is called Anything is Possible. And our mission is to prove through mountaineering that anything is possible for women in the mountains. And so we are raising funds to support women's education in Nepal. I was shocked to learn that for women, Nepalese women over the age of 15, something like 48% have never had any kind of education.
Oh no.
at all, which is hard to imagine, sitting where we are in the United States. And it's especially shocking to me because women, really are the heart of those communities, the heart of the family. And so we want to support every year at least one woman to realize whatever her educational dream is. If she wants to learn accounting, if she wants to open a tea house, if she wants to learn to be a seamstress, whatever that is, we want to support that. And in terms of climbing, we're employing only women on our team. So sorry, Kevin, even though you're going to get in shape, you won't be able to join us this fall.
That's all right. That makes me feel good right there.
But it's important to us to show, what women can do when we support one another and when we work hard as a team. So our entire team, and I don't know if this has ever happened. There have been other women only teams, but I know that at least some of them have been supported by men. And so we are, every single person, like the cooks, the women carrying loads, fixing the rope, everyone will be female on our team. And our goal is to really support them, and just sort of pay homage to the work that they do in the mountains in Nepal. So we're super excited. We're climbing a mountain called Cholatsi, which is in Nepal. It's 6,800 meters. And yeah, if you want to learn more, you can check out my website on Lisa Climbs. But we're planning to go in October.
Your website again is
lisaclimbs.com.
lisaclimbs.com, and the website for the nonprofit if somebody wanted to.
You can link it. It's anythingispossible.today, but it's all linked from Lisa Climbs.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you're, I wanted to talk to you because, or ask you about this, because I've heard about Sherpas and the folks that are there. Are they as hardy as I've heard that
Oh
they
my
are?
gosh. Unbelievably strong and humble and fun. Yeah, so where my backpack, I mean, I'm a small woman. I weigh 112 pounds. Um, and some of the Sherpa are the same size as me. And if my backpack weighed 35 pounds, theirs weighed 65 pounds. And they were moving faster than me in the mountains, and doing, carrying super heavy loads up the hill before breakfast. It is, I know there have been a lot of documentaries about Sherpa and their contribution to mountaineering. And I think it's really important to recognize what that community does for those of us that endeavor to climb in the Himalaya. I could not climb without their support. And I think it's really important to recognize that it takes a team. For someone like me who's not a professional climber, it takes a team of people, most of which are Sherpa, to fix the route, to carry loads. And there's all kinds of talk about whether the aesthetic of climbing that way. That's my choice of how I climb. And I think it's important to recognize all the support that goes into making that happen.
So when you're climbing a mountain, I'm fixated on this. When you're climbing a mountain, are you cold? Are you warm? Are you hot? Do you have to worry about sweating? Do you have to monitor how fast you're moving so that you don't sweat, then it freeze, and then you get hypothermia and all of that kind of stuff? Does that all play into it?
All those things are happening probably all at the same time. Yes. Yeah. Um, so obviously mountains are a cold environment, big mountains anyway. And but ironically, I have probably been hot in the mountains more than I've been cold. And that could be because I perform better when I'm cold. When I get hot and overheated, I just tend to lose energy very, very quickly. Um, so it becomes a constant for me, sort of a constant monitoring of my temperature and my body and making sure that I'm taking care of it. And the sweating thing that you mentioned is a really big deal, not so much because it might freeze, but because you're sweating out, all of your hydration, all of your fluids, all of your electrolytes. And so if you're moving faster than you need to and sweating profusely, it just means you're getting behind the hydration curve, which can be really dangerous in the mountains. So I think that mountaineering, especially in the big mountains, is just a constant game of self-care and being really aware of, for example, when I was climbing Everest near the summit, the toes on my right foot were starting to get cold, and it was still dark out. Many, many hours of climbing left, and I had to constantly wiggle them. And I told myself that if I could ever not wiggle them, that I was going to turn around, because no mountain is worth my toes or fingers. So it's very, continually monitoring how you're feeling and what you're doing, and having a plan to address it if things go wrong. Um, when I get cold, climbing in the Cascades, I will tell myself that I will, if I notice I'm cold, I will keep going for 20 minutes. And if, and I figure if that's enough to maybe get my heart rate up, if nothing changes, then it's time for me to come up with a new game plan and to reassess what I'm doing. So the plan becomes a really important part of that equation.
I can only imagine. Now, are you also see? I'm a competitive. When I was playing football or playing baseball, I would be competitive and stuff. But you can't do that because you have to actually kind of go within yourself and go and keep track of yourself and not worry about if somebody else is going faster than you. Is that true?
Yeah. So that's a very astute observation, Kevin, because most people who climb are competitive, right?
Right.
We're ambitious. We're probably successful in other areas of our lives. We naturally compare ourselves to other people. And this is a very important point that I really hit on with the people that I coach, because that competition is not going to help you in the mountains. In fact, it's only going to hurt you. I've seen so many people put on day one, even climbing Rainier, push too hard, totally flag out, and then not be able to have enough reserves to climb the next day. And so it's it's constantly sort of putting that ego and that competitiveness in check. I like to think of it as, it is just me in the mountain. It does not matter what anyone else is doing. Um, you know, Sort of notwithstanding me needing to help someone who's on my rope team, of course, but like in terms of just how I'm moving and the whole sort of goal of climbing, it's just me in the mountain. And I try to put all that other sort of junk outside of my mind, because it also burns energy. And I like, when I'm climbing, I like to consider that I have this, a reserve of energy all day. This is as much as I'm going to get. And what am I going to do with it? I do not want to be, getting wound up about why Nick is chewing with his mouth open in the dining tent, because it's not going to help me at all.
I can only imagine that there would be times when people
Oh yeah.
are annoying as hell.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
when you're when you're doing that. But I have also been told that climbing a mountain, because you're within yourself, it's you, the mountain, and nature, that it's a very spiritual
It
experience.
is. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I didn't realize that until I was describing climbing to someone years ago, and they said, it sounds like it was a walking meditation. And it just made me realize, like, oh my gosh, I think it really is this sort of spiritual experience, which, is part of what draws me to big mountains. There's this sense of just really being at one and at peace with nature. And I think that that's part of why I like to sort of feel into this relationship that I have with the mountains I climb. Often you are in the dark, sort of head down by yourself, and everything else is gone, right? There's no cell phone, there's no garbage to take out, there's, no homework to do. And in terms of like your sensory perception too, it's just this tiny little headlamp of light, tiny little ring of headlamp light, and that's all that you can see. And so it sort of draws you inside, I think, and forces many people, myself for sure, to really just have this sort of sense of peace with how my body's moving in nature.
It would be a fascinating experience to do that if you were in shape for it and stuff, because you're right, it would be like a meditation.
Yeah, it really
And
is.
the most unique meditation you've ever had.
I don't know if anyone's going to open up a meditation center on the top of Mount Everest, but maybe.
Probably not. And one of these, and I hope you put it in your book. Now, is the book written and is being edited now?
Yeah, so it's written. We're just wrapping up the proofread this week. The digital advanced reader copies are available. We'll have printed versions of that in a couple of weeks, and it will be launched in bookstores and available digitally on January 10th of next year.
So I hope you put in there some of the logistical nightmares that have to go with that. Like,
Oh yeah.
what happens? And we don't need to talk about it here, but it just as a question, what happens when you have to go number 2 at 22,000 feet?
Yeah, that's in there. You can read the book and find out.
Oh, good.
Also commentary as a woman, like getting your period at 26,000 feet. Not really fun to deal with either. So all of those things are in there for those of you that are curious enough. I will just say it's sort of like high altitude gymnastics.
I can only imagine. By the way, we're talking with Lisa Thompson, and she is an amazing woman in anybody's book. She's the second American woman to climb K2. She's climbed Everest. She's climbed almost everything that's worth climbing, and and you're a lot of fun to talk to. And I thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.
Is there anything else you would like? I'll tell you what. I want to set aside and let you have a couple of moments to tell our audience anything that you would like them to know about now or in the future.
So I like to talk about finding my voice. This is something that I spoke to in the book, and something that took me a long time as a female mountaineer to do. I was just listening to another podcast of a female mountaineer, and there's just so few of us. It's gotten better. But when I started climbing, I was often the only girl on my team. In fact, I almost called my book The Only Girl. And that caused me to not use my own voice. It caused me to often go along with things that didn't feel quite right to me. And there was a moment when I was descending K2. So I had just summited, and I was at a point in the mountain where it is just steep ice, like blue ice, very dense. And it happens to be the point on the mountain where the most people have fallen and died. And I knew that. And when I got there that day, sort of standing on the precipice of this ice face, and there are 2 ropes there. One is meant to ascend, and one is meant to descend. And I'm going down, so I walk over to the rope to descend, and there's someone laying on it. Someone had decided to use it to go up instead of down, and had gotten fatigued and was laying there on the ice. And in that moment, my friend and expedition leader, Garrett Madison, said to me, I think you need to descend. And he described this method called arm wrapping, which I had done hundreds of times. It is not the most secure way to descend a big mountain. And it just didn't feel right to me. It just didn't. And this is a man who I've climbed with for years, who knows me and my capability, who I trust implicitly. And I just said no to him. I just said, I'm not doing that today because it doesn't feel right for me. And in hindsight, having to, sort of untangle with this man, unfortunately laying on the rope, who survived. He was fine. He was just incredibly tired. And, getting past him was a whole sequence of me building anchors and securing myself, and then moving my gear to the rope between he and I, and then building another anchor and moving it again. And so it was a very delicate dance in the most dangerous part of that mountain. And if I had descended a different way, I wouldn't have had, the gear, I wouldn't have been in the same position to really safely get around him. And so my mantra these days is to find your voice and to use it, because that's when you're authentically you. And that's what makes us all beautiful and unique and positive.
I love that. Thank you very much.
You're so
Thank
welcome.
Thank you very much for saying that. That's really cool because you are your best person to determine what you're capable of and what you're going to do and what you're not going to do.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
believe that the inspiration that comes to you in those moments is from above and it's from a different place.
Yeah.
And it is people that are looking out after you because they
Yes.
want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so your book again is coming in January. I'm so looking forward to it. And the name of the book again is
Finding Elevation.
Finding Elevation, and the subtitle can be Finding Your Voice.
The subtitle is actually Fear and Courage on the World's Deadliest Mountain.
That would be both of those I would have.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be on the deadliest mountain, so I wouldn't have a lot of that. So, but I appreciate you, Lisa, for being here, and I, like I said, I'm going to have you on KKNW, and we'll redo this during the course of the summer sometime, whenever works through your
That'd
schedule.
be great.
Because I imagine you are a busy person. Where are you going to climb next?
So the next climb I have is actually, I have 2 climbs in July in the Cascades. So Shuckson and Baker. And then I'll probably sneak a Rainier climb in there somewhere this summer. It's my goal to always get up that mountain every summer. And then I'll be headed to Nepal to climb in the Himalaya in October.
I can tell you that just by the way you said that, I'm going to sneak in a climb of Mount Rainier. There are people who spend 6 months to a year of trying to get into the type of shape to do, and you're just going to sneak off one day and go climb the mountain. That's pretty amazing.
Well, not to take anything away from anyone. It's always been a challenging mountain for me. It's always very fun though. And I love that it's so close and easy to climb if the weather's good.
Absolutely. And we have got some of the best weather, but I've also seen times when it can be clear everywhere else and the mountain is shrouded in clouds as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You have to be careful. Thank you so much for being here. And if you'll wait right there, I will be right back and stuff.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of kmmedia.pro. Please visit our website, oddly enough, named kmmedia.pro, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to each other because each other's all we've